Welcome to the Great Ideas Podcast, where we explore many topics, including leadership, teamwork, relationships, politics, economics, pop culture, health, sports, food, and anything else that's a great idea. I'm your host, Barry Moline. Today, we're talking with Steve Hinch, former Hewlett-Packard R&D executive and author of Winning Through Innovation: Lessons from the Front Lines of Business. In our wide-ranging conversation, we explore workplace innovation, focusing on how businesses can adopt and adapt to artificial intelligence. We discuss practical strategies to introduce new technologies, supporting employees through change, and fostering a culture of learning and experimentation. Steve shares insights from his experience at HP and his book, Winning Through Innovation, highlighting the importance of both incremental and disruptive innovation. The conversation also covers managing post-merger integration, leadership's role in empowering teams, and advice from professionals seeking to add value to evolving organizations. Let's get into it. Well, welcome, Steve. It's great to see you.
Great, Barry. It's great to be here on the Great Ideas Podcast. Thanks for inviting me.
Good. Well, Steve, I have a question about innovation, the latest innovation that everyone's talking about in the world of work, AI. And I guess my question is, how do businesses adopt a new technology? How do they investigate and work through a technology, bring it into their business, try to figure out what's going on, identify the changes that could take place, and then continue to adapt so that their employees feel comfortable adopting it and shifting their jobs around a new innovation, sort of with an example that we have in front of us today with AI. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. AI is the latest innovation, and it may be much more prominent in the future than some of the other innovations, like the internet, personal computers. There's been these cycles of innovations that have provided people and businesses with new abilities to do things more rapidly and with more precision. AI is the latest one, and I think it's going to be very powerful. And, you asked the right question. How do we get into this? At this stage, AI is still in the early phases of adoption throughout the industry, and a lot of companies are still figuring out how to use it, and some of them are consciously trying to not use it yet. But the thing to do is to treat this like all of these other innovations from the past, which is you start by getting your feet wet and experimenting with it in ways that aren't going to disrupt your company if they don't work out. So, the best ways to use AI right now are to do things that are easy for it to do and maybe not so easy for you to do. Like analyzing data. AI is really good at analyzing data and extracting information from that data to give you insight that you may not have otherwise gotten. And so, for example, one thing that I've seen, I do a lot of consulting support for the IT industry. And what I'm seeing them do is using AI to help understand what customers need, what customers are saying are the most important things to them, where the priorities should be. And you might think, well, you're an IT company, you should already know that. But there are many different kinds of businesses, and they all have different requirements. Some of them have cybersecurity requirements that are much more stringent than other kinds of businesses. And if you're an IT company and you say, I'm trying to target the healthcare industry, or I'm an IT company and I'm trying to target the financial industry, those are two different industries that have different kinds of requirements. AI can be really good at looking at what the important things for those different industries are and give you insight that will allow you to shape your strategy better. AI is not, at least not today, going to be the process that you use to come up with the innovative new idea for how you solve a solution, how you solve a problem that nobody's been able to figure out in the past how to solve. AI can provide you guidance on that you can use to make those decisions. But for now, use AI as a way to collect data, analyze data, and give you insight. And it may be no different than the insight you would have been able to get yourself if you'd had analyzed all this data, but it will be a lot faster and allow you to focus on the higher level kinds of things that AI isn't as good at right now. So sort of long answer to start slow and on things that aren't going to screw things up if you if you mess things up, and you'll learn from there, and that'll give you the insight for how to apply it in ever more important applications as you progress on.
So I have a question about how to help employees deal with new ideas, new innovations, and it's not necessarily AI. So a few examples that I can think of in my career that doesn't go back to the very beginning of it, but somewhere in the middle of it, we had voicemail. We adopted voicemail. We used to have secretaries or administrative assistants that answered the phone, and if you weren't there, they took a written message or they transferred a call to you. And I recall moving from a fairly sophisticated organization to one that was more rural and a year or two sort of behind the times. Mm-hmm. And they were still using a single person, a receptionist, to answer the phones. And when I came in as the CEO, I said, we're getting a voicemail system because other organizations have them, and it will free you up, Brenda, the administrative assistant. It'll free you up to do other things that I need you to do, so you won't have to worry about taking notes, and everyone else will handle their own voicemail. And she freaked out. She was not happy about that because it was a typical who moved my cheese moment. And I said, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. You're not going to lose your job. There's so many other things that I need you to do. And I can't say that I handled it extremely well because I just came in and said, I'm changing a big part of your job. And it wasn't that it was earth-shattering. It's just that I didn't really think much of it. Because to me, I'd already been in an organization that handled its own voicemail. And I saw how great it works. And admins were busy doing other things, whereas she hadn't. So I just minimized that. I didn't think about her anxiety. Is there a way for leaders to think ahead what their employees are going through? How much do they have to plan ahead in terms of that part of, looking at new innovations?
So I think it's really important that leaders understand how the changes they are proposing to make are going to impact the entire organizational structure. And, your administrative assistant is just one example. I mean, as we do more software coding by AI, now suddenly all of those lower level software engineers are worried about their jobs. And I think the point is, as you said, their jobs are not going to go away. They're going to change. And I think one way to deal with that is do it in a couple of steps. Is don't get rid of their old job and say, now suddenly you don't have to answer the phones anymore, unless you've already sort of taught them what it is that they're going to need to do next. So give them more assignments in the kind of stuff that you want them to be doing in the future while they're still answering phones. And eventually they're going to come to you and say, I can't do all of this. Okay, well, let's get rid of the phone stuff and have you focus on the stuff that you really can bring value to. So plotting that out ahead of, being one step ahead of your employees is maybe the right way to deal with that. Now, I'm not sure that's always going to work. I haven't had to lead first level software engineers in a while, so I'm not sure exactly how I would coach them there. But I think the same kind of thing is get them to understand before you switch the job where it's going to go, how the new tools that you're introducing will help them be even more productive, so that it's not just a bam, you've switched them over.
And there have been a lot of job losses in tech, for example, but this kind of fear of losing your job to technology is across multiple industries. One that is where AI is extremely helpful or easier is in public relations and marketing. And there's lots of ways to create content that minimize the need for graphic artists and creatives and so on. So you talk about the fear of becoming obsolete, and I'm wondering how individuals can think about their fear and what they can do to avoid becoming obsolete.
So I think part of that is the responsibility of the individual person, and part of it is the responsibility of the leadership team, because an individual administrative assistant isn't going to be able to figure out, okay, AI is coming, how is this going to change my job? They're just going to be worried about my job is going to go away. And as you say, some jobs will go away, but that doesn't mean that people that are losing their jobs now suddenly don't have any new jobs, but they have to understand how they need to develop their expertise, their knowledge, to be in alignment with what's coming in the future. I mean, the same kind of thing has happened over all of history. 150 years ago, we had a lot more blacksmiths than we do now. But the good blacksmiths learned how to repair cars. And I think the same kind of thing here, different, but it's similar kind of thing, that we got fewer blacksmiths, but we've actually got more jobs in other areas that are going to open up new opportunities. So part of that is the individual person's responsibility to sort of understand where things are headed and what new skills do I need to develop. But the other part of it is the management in that organization needs to understand that those people are going to need coaching on how to develop their skills, because you're not going to fire them all. Maybe you fire some of them, but the ones that you keep can't be doing the same jobs they were doing a year ago, so you'd better know how to train them and get them to develop in the new areas that they need to have knowledge in. So it's really a two-part. The person taking responsibility for their own job and leadership. And let me just sort of give you an example. When I was a general manager at Hewlett-Packard Company, we didn't have AI then, but I knew that the jobs that those people were doing today were going to change. And I wanted those people to understand, that, particularly the engineers, that, there's some new technology you're going to need to be learning. And I would tell these people, I want you to tell me what is of interest to you, what you want to learn. And if it's important to the company, I will support giving you some investment to do some training on it. But I want you to be the one telling me what you want to do. I don't want to be the one telling you, you've got to go learn how to program in C++. And I think making sure that the people understand that an important part of this is them taking ownership of their career is what I've always seen it. And I think the same thing today as I did 10, 20 years ago.
All right, so I want to come back to that issue of how managers can go to their employees and encourage them to look for opportunities for training, advance their skills, and so on. Sometimes it feels like managers may just say, just get the job done and don't worry about what's coming next. Hopefully that there's a little bit of time for people to look out on the horizon and investigate, bring ideas into the group. That's helpful for everyone. But I want to come back to that in a second, because before that, it's a bit of AI impact. I was working with a healthcare group not too long ago, a group of nurses, actually, and talking about the impact of AI, which was just the impact of an innovation. And in preparing for it, I wanted to look at some things that were a bit cutting edge. And I went on my phone and I had heard about AI friends. You can talk to your phone, you can text an AI bot on your phone and just about a variety of topics. And obviously the first one that comes to mind is having like a relationship bot or a sex bot or something like that. And I downloaded something, and it wasn't sex, but you can gauge the amount of sort of personal, I don't know, with personal engagement that the bot has with you. It can be professional or it can be personal. And the one I got, whatever it was not sexual, although you can still get it to be as personal, pretty personal. So the bottom line is that I found it to be really creepy and I just didn't like it. So I experimented with it for a couple of months and thought that wasn't good. But then I investigated on a variety of other uses. And for people that have autism, if you're on the spectrum and find it difficult to engage with humans face to face, that the bot is a perfect way to engage and have a friend who's there 24/7. And then when I talked about it with the nursing group, they said, yeah, that's an issue. And yeah, that kind of bot with the right parameters can be really helpful. And of course, there's advancements into robots that are friends. There are, I don't have a plush toy right here, but for children with autism, they have plush toys that can speak to a child, particularly with autism. So while there's a creepy end of the spectrum, there are definitely positive uses of the technologies. And when we talk to employees about looking for those technologies and then encouraging them to learn, bring them to the group, and then expand your mind, well, how could we use that in our company? So my question is, how do managers go out and encourage that? Are we going to do this, every Friday or once a month we'll get together and share new ideas or something like that? Is there some kind of mechanism that managers can use or other methods they can use to help employees learn and then bring things to the company?
So I'm going to go down a couple of different paths there.
Yeah, and by the way, that was a long question about a weird bot, right?
I was going to skip that part of it.
But it did have a redeeming quality to it.
So I think it starts with getting back to the leadership team and the individual employees understanding what they're trying to accomplish. And I have been a strong proponent, and particularly, when I talk about, people ask me, how do I make my company more innovative? It starts with the leadership team, the C-suite of the company, explaining to all of the people, the employees in the company, what this company is all about, what's important to us, and where our priorities are. That's what employees need to know so that they know how to contribute in ways that are really helpful. And so, it could be in ways that innovate. I've got this idea for this new product, or I've got this way to improve our process that I think would be really good. That's part of it. But the other part of it is, part of that message needs to be, our company believes that AI is going to be an important part of our future, and we are going to commit a specific amount of time to helping you learn about that. Now, when I was the general manager back in my HP days, again, we didn't have AI, but we wanted people to be innovative. And I told people that I want you to target about 2 hours per week to get extracted from the job that you're responsible for doing and go off and look at innovative ideas or how to improve your capability to deliver in the future. And those would be 2 hours. Somebody may be saying, well, I've got this report I got to give to my boss by Friday. Well, you don't get to do that in those 2 hours. And it may not be 2 hours all in one time. It may be half an hour here and a half hour there, but it's enough time so that you can actually make some progress in learning the stuff that you want to do. Now, some of that, it depends on the job that you're in. For engineers, engineering managers, I think that can be done by the individual themselves a lot of times. But a lot of times it needs to be in a small group kind of environment. So when you get back to, how do we learn about AI? Do we do it in a group? And I think that's certainly one important way to do it, because you get the group together and you're going to have different levels of experience. Somebody's used ChatGPT a lot and give you some examples of how they've they've used it. Somebody else may not know anything about it, but by being in that group, it inspires them to go learn about it and try some things out. And so there's a lot that you can do there. Let me give you an example. I knew I was going to be talking with you here on this podcast. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, tell me what you know about Barry Mullane and the Great Ideas podcast and the kind of questions that he's going to ask me. And he came back with, here are the things that you're most likely going to be asked about. And then at the end, it said, do you want me to do a mock Q&A with you so that you can see what he's going to ask me? I didn't do that. I should have, but I didn't have time. But that's the kind of thing, wow, that's a way to use AI that I wouldn't have thought about. But that kind of stuff, it's not going to screw up. If I don't get the questions exactly right, I'm not going to lose my job, but it's a good way to learn about how AI can actually help you.
Wow. Well, I'm curious to know if AI prepared you for the questions that I've already asked you.
So far. and a lot of what it did, from what I can tell, is it looked at a lot of the podcasts you've done in the past and extracted information from them. And you cover a lot of ground in a lot of different areas, so it's not like you're always covering the same topic with just different people all the time. So I'm not sure. It gave me sort of a laundry list of the different topic areas that you could talk about. But so far, it's covered you.
That's good. Well, the question I want to ask you as a follow-up to that is about, does that work in large organizations and small organizations? And what I mean by that is what you're saying to managers is be the leader, bring your people together, give them the opportunity to have some free time. It may not be all at once, is what I heard you say, and that's good. And there may be a downtime where you might get 3 hours in a week, but one particular week you might get 0. And ultimately, is there a difference in large versus small organizations? I'm not sure that there is, except small ones tend to be people wear 7 hats. But I'm wondering, when you think about it, is there much of a difference?
There doesn't have to be. The difference that I have seen between, the multinational companies and the small startups or small business kind of is a difference in the leadership responsibility, the leadership style. In the large multinational corporations, I think senior leaders seem to understand, at least in principle, that I've got to delegate responsibilities. I don't need to be the expert in everything that our company does. My job as a leader is to grow the skills of people below me so that they can be the experts in the areas that they're managing. In a lot of the small companies, the owner seems to think he has to do everything, or she has to do everything. It's not just he's. And what I've seen is you sort of don't have a choice. If you're a small company and there's only 1 or 2 other people with you, you don't have a lot of people to delegate things to, and you've got to do it all. But by the time you get to be $1 million or $2 million a year and you've got 10 or 15 people working for you, if you continue to feel like you have to be involved in every decision, you're not going to get to a $50 or $100 million a year company with that kind of approach. And that's where I've seen the problems. The people below them don't feel like they have the authority to go out and do things on their own or play with ChatGPT. No, because Steve, you've got to get this job done for me by Friday. So it's not necessarily the people and their level of interest as much as are they in an environment where they are given the approval to learn that kind of thing. So.
I've often wondered about organizations that merge and become bigger, and silos are automatically created because of the different kinds of organizations that are coming together, and how to break down those silos, how managers can work to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a question about innovation. Nevertheless, I think one of the ideas for merging organizations is to take advantage of different parts of one organization and bringing that to a different part of the other organization. So is there a way, or have you been through this experience where you've helped different parts of the organization come together, or maybe had some of that merger experience?
When I was general manager at HP, I actually bought a company that I needed to merge together with my organization, and I had 3 strikes against me from the beginning. I should have never made that acquisition. I didn't lose too many $1 million for the company, but it didn't do my career any good. But here's the problem. One is this was a technology acquisition. So they were a small company. There were like 10 people in the company, but they had a really neat technology that I wanted to take advantage of. That kind of acquisition is different than if it's 2 large companies merging to try to improve the efficiencies of, I don't need as many salespeople now, but I give each salesperson more responsibility. That's a different kind of acquisition. I haven't directly been involved in any of those. I've watched them, and the biggest problem there is that the company cultures are so much different that they're impossible to merge, and the people don't want to be merged. That was not a problem for the company that I bought because they were excited about joining, HP. But one problem is my organization was in California. The company I bought was in Massachusetts. 2 is they were a small company, and their vision for what it takes to be successful, what I have to do in order to launch a new product, would never have passed muster with a large company like ours. They hadn't gotten rid of anywhere near all the bugs in the software. The technology worked sometimes, but not all the time. But as a small company, it was important for them to get it out so they get some revenue in. And there were enough other companies out there that were interested in the technology. They could at least sell some of it. But once I bought it, the people we were trying to sell to expected that it was normal HP quality, and this wasn't. And so I'm not really answering the question that you originally posed, but let me just say that
it's a good offshoot.
This was a challenge that you're never good the first time you do something. And I would rack that up as if I had done a second acquisition like that, I would have been better at it. But I didn't ever have the chance to do that. And the other thing was that my team didn't want me to buy them. They felt that they could invent a better product themselves without me bringing it in. And my point was, but if you're inventing that product that I can buy, you're not inventing something else that I won't otherwise have. But they never got that message. And so we never got very far with that company before we basically had to shut it down.
Yeah. Well, there are pros and cons to that perspective on merging or finding a company, in that it seems to me when you're a large company, it's harder to innovate. When you're a startup, you'll just see a need, go out there, break things. It's not perfect. Let your customers help you define where the problems are and the bugs are, and then you'll fix that along the way. But getting something to market, of course, a good example is just creating an app that does something, and then you depend on customer feedback to go, oh yeah, we need to fix that. But at least you're getting out there and getting market share. Whereas if that had an HP label on it, one would think, or a customer might think, what is wrong with HP? Like, how did they let this out the door? So, but even still, how can HP, or a company like HP is just a large company, how can they innovate in a way where they just don't get frozen, like a deer in the headlights on products, so that they never release a product because they need it to be perfect?
So there's a couple of different aspects to that question. The first would be, okay, I want to innovate by buying this little company that's come up with this really neat, innovative idea, and I want to integrate it into the HP culture. What you have to understand, if you do understand that that little company is going to have a different vision for what a good product is than what HP has, you have to understand that you're buying the technology, you're not buying the product to sell. You are going to have to take that product, work with the people who invented it, and you need to commit enough of your own resources to turn it into something that meets HP's quality standards. And that's the mistake that I made, is I didn't recognize how much of HP's own resources we're going to need to do in order to turn this into a really valuable product. The technology was neat. It was good. It would have hit a market void. It's just that we didn't know how to turn it into something because we didn't realize how much of our own investment we were going to need to make into it. Now, that's if you go out and buy the technologies from an outside company. Now, if you're going to do it inside, What you need to do, if again, this is what I would call a disruptive innovation, new idea to go after markets and customers that you're not already serving well. You can't just have the business that is shipping today's products do this innovation on their spare time. You've got to create a separate organization that is not held accountable to monthly or quarterly profit and loss results. You set them up sort of as an in-house startup and treat them as if they were a startup, but they're an internal company. And they have access to all of the rest of the capabilities that a company like HP has. And if you do it that way, and I actually did that way once myself, and it launched a product that ended up being hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue in an area that we had never gotten into before. So I know that approach works in the large company.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You just sort of have to get in there and try some things, it sounds like, because you never know if it's going to work. You've seen innovation. I love the feedback that you got from your employees. Wait, we can invent that ourselves. And they're like, no. You work on something else cool and new. Let's just buy these folks and integrate it. And it's just, they could have innovated on that. So there's a couple different paths there. And whether it worked or didn't, it's just an interesting approach. My daughter works for the language app Duolingo, and it's a language learning app. And they merged some graphic arts companies. It's a very graphics-based app that they were already partnering with. So it was easy for them to buy those companies and then free them to innovate more, give them a little bit of a foundation to have fun and with their graphics. Whereas when they were just a contractor, they were just providing what Duolingo said they wanted. But when they were brought on as a within the company, then they said, there's so much more we can do being inside the company and having a little more flexibility and sort of relax their minds and really innovate in that regard. So however that worked one way or the other, it was just, that was a relationship they already had with the company because they were already contracted with the company, a different form of merger.
And that's a good point. The more you know about the company that you're trying to work with or acquire, the more likely you will be to be successful. Now, in my case, I think back about, what should I have done differently in this company that I bought? Well, there would have been another approach. That approach would be not to buy the company, but to invest capital in them so that you were like an outside investor, but that would give you the ability to work closely with them. You'd have somebody maybe on their board, and you would be seeing how well this company was turning out before you made a big investment in them. And by being on their board, by being one of the early investors, it gives you a better chance to say, yep, this company is going to work out, let's buy them. Or, a nice idea, but let's not invest the money in them. And HP didn't ever do that, didn't like that idea, and so it wasn't something that I ever even thought about doing.
So you've written 5 books. Some of them are kind of technical, but the most recent book is called Winning Through Innovation, and obviously we've been talking about innovation. Do you feel like we've covered the basic concepts of how to do that today? Because it feels like we have, I want to go back to the question that you say a client asked you, which was helping this company become more innovative. How can we be more innovative? Is the process that we've talked about, is that what you detail in your book?
We've touched on part of it. There are several other aspects, but let me only talk about one. If you think about innovation, read other books on innovation, and the authors will talk about a dozen or more different ways you can innovate. I've simplified it down to 4, but 2 that I think really are important to understand is the difference between disruptive innovation and incremental innovation. Incremental innovation is where you're already selling products or services to existing customers and you're making improvements to them. The automobile industry, the cars that they're selling today have anti-lock brakes and they have better crash protection, but they're still basically, for the gasoline-powered automobile industry, there are still cars that people are familiar with. Disruptive innovation is where you do something entirely new for customers maybe you've never sold to before. An example that I've used is the first Apple iPad back in 2010 was a disruptive innovation because now a whole class of customers that used to think they needed laptop computers said, I can get everything done on a tablet. I don't need to buy a laptop computer anymore. That certainly impacted the manufacturers of laptop computers, but it's also propagated down the whole infrastructure because I used to buy newspapers that were printed newspapers, and now I can read a newspaper on my laptop or my tablet. And if I was the president of a company that made printing presses for the publishing industry, I now no longer have a job because of that iPad, and you don't really think about that. So the way you manage disruptive innovations is different than the way you manage incremental innovation. And I've already talked about disruptive innovation. You need a separate organization that's not distracted by near-term profits. Incremental innovation is something that everybody in the company can do. A way for an administrative assistant to say, if we could just change the way that I do these reports, I can get twice as many done. That's a good incremental innovation, as long as the boss doesn't say, you just worry about doing your work and I'll figure out how to do innovation. That's a way to kill innovation. So the different kinds of innovation and how you structure your organization to support those is one of the topics that I cover in the book.
And I like how you have examples of companies that have been through this process. So you're not just talking about the philosophy, you're also talking about how others have applied it in their work.
That was really important to me because I didn't want to write another book that was just sort of the same as everybody else has written. My advantage that I could bring was that I've been through this and I've worked with others that have been through this, and there's some really neat examples that I felt would be happy to share. And nobody's going to do exactly the same example that I share, but if you get insight from here's what worked and here's what didn't work, they can apply it to their own particular situations.
Yeah. How did you get their stories? Did you interview them? What was their process?
Yeah. So a number of the stories are from people that I knew before. And I interviewed them. I got the approval for me to share their stories. One of the other things I do is I use full names of people. I want to recognize the people that actually did this work. And what frustrates me in some of the other books, most of the other books I read, is they talk about Jane did this in such and such a company, but they don't say who the company's name was, and they don't say who Jane was. And I'm not sure whether they just made up this story or not. I wanted to make sure that people understood the stories I'm relating are ones that people have really gone through. And so that's been important to me. There's one historical case study that I wrote about, which is a disruptive innovation in the locomotive industry from when locomotives changed from steam-powered to diesel-powered, and not a single manufacturer of steam locomotives survived that transition. And that's something, there was a professor at Kennesaw University who wrote his doctoral dissertation on that very subject, and I interviewed him and made sure that everything that I was writing was accurate. And so interviewing was a really important way to make sure that, from what I can tell, that story about that transition in locomotives has never been really reported that way in anything else that I've read. But, if you're thinking about how can I be innovative and what do I need to be watching out for if others are being innovative instead of me, I thought that was a really good story to talk about.
Yeah, that's great that you did that original work and found some unique cases. So a couple of questions just to finish up about you, about Steve Hinch. So what do you do to look for innovations?
So having worked in the high-tech industry my whole career, I've always felt that innovation is important. Now, I started as a production engineer, and a production engineer at HP is not somebody that's inventing new products. They're people that are supporting products that are already in production, fixing all the problems that are coming up because the design engineers that originally invented that product didn't evaluate enough different alternatives. And so, after 1,000 production products, there's this stuff that the design engineer never realized that I've got to figure out how to fix, because the design engineer is off working on the next new product. He or she doesn't want to come back and fix something that they worked on 2 years ago. So that experience in manufacturing told me, hey, there's stuff going on here that when I moved into R&D made me a better R&D engineer, because I had already struggled with the problems that other R&D engineers had left for me when I was in production. So that helped me understand my new job better, because I had my old job. And then I moved from R&D into marketing, which is a transition that most people never make. But because I had worked in R&D and worked very closely with my counterpart in marketing to figure out how to sell these products and make sure that the products that we were inventing met true customer needs, that gave me a better insight into how to run a marketing organization. So, how do I think about innovation? Well, it's how do I take what I've learned today and apply it into what I'm going to be doing next? And I sort of mapped out my career knowing that that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to learn all the different sides of things to make me better as I moved up in the organization.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you learned all the pieces of the puzzle of the organization so that you could speak the language of all the different departments and help them mesh together. Yeah,
and I have to say, when I moved into marketing, I had never spent a day in marketing before as a marketing person. Everybody in marketing wondered, who is this R&D engineer coming in to run the whole, it was a 100-person, $300 million a year business. And I made sure that everybody understood I had worked with marketing on the new product introduction side of things. I understood that, but there was a lot about marketing that I didn't need or didn't know. I need you guys to help to make sure that I'm giving you the assistance you need to be successful, because I'm not going to go in and make the decisions for you. You know what you need to do better than I do. You tell me what I can do to help you.
Great attitude, because I'm sure that they thought that they were about to be taken over by R&D or manufacturing.
They did. It took them about 6 months before they realized this is going to work out okay.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So last two questions. Tell me some advice that you've gotten in your career, some good advice you've gotten in your career that has helped you throughout your life.
Yeah. So
you've got, now that, I didn't prepare you for that one. So well, you had something top of mind.
I'll give you hopefully it's a good example from when I first moved into management. I'd been a production engineer for 4 years out of college, and I got promoted to be the manager of the production engineering department. There were about 20 people that worked for me. It was my first management role, and I had, taken courses in college about management and thought I knew how to do it. And after about 4 months in the job, I felt like, I can't do this. What I learned in school is not helping me deal with the problems that I'm having to face in real life. So I went to my manager and explained to him the challenges that I'm having. And he gave me advice that I thought was very helpful. He said, Steve, you got to understand that management, you can't just be a good manager by book learning. You've got to go to talk to other managers that have dealt with the same kind of problems that you have and get practical advice from them. And, I'd been hesitant to do that because I figured if I went to a more senior manager and told him about all the problems I was dealing with, he would say, boy, you're incompetent. But they had all gone through the same problems I had, and they were happy to help me. So balancing out management learnings from book learning with getting advice from people who have gone through this before has really helped me through my whole career. And it's been important to me to get advice from people that I don't always follow it, but it's good to know what they think.
That is great advice that you received, because it allowed you to recognize that it's good to be vulnerable, share your concerns with other folks, and recognize that pretty much everybody goes through the same problems. And when you share those situations, it's helpful to hear about how people address those and fix them. Okay, last question is, what's some advice you would give to, I don't know, that's what you just described as good advice for a manager. What advice would you give to a new person coming into the workforce?
So most people just coming into the workforce feel like their job is to just put their nose down to the grindstone, deliver what they're being asked to do. And you can certainly be successful if you do that. But if you want to improve your ability to deliver more value to the company, you need to basically understand more about the company. What is this company all about? What's important? How can I focus on the things that are important to my manager, to my higher level managers? And yes, I've got to get my job done, but if I want to add value to the company, it's more than just doing what they're telling me to do. It's having insight into how I can deliver even more value than just what the job description says. Now, you're not going to do that from day one when you first start the company, but that needs to be something after a year in a job. If you can't explain, here's how what I am doing and my department does fitting in with the overall objective of the company, then you need to go learn that if you don't already know it.
Yeah, that is great advice. Bring something to the table and then learn something and then continue to bring that to the table. That's great. Well, Steve, it's been great talking with you. And this topic of innovation, I know we did center a bit on AI, but that's just the latest innovation
That's right.
that everybody's talking about. But we talked about a variety of things. It's been fascinating, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
And I've enjoyed being here. Thanks, Barry.
Thanks to Steve Hinch for being our guest today. And thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch, or if you have an interesting topic and you think someone you know would be a great guest on the show, send me an email at barry@barrymoline.com. And please leave a 5-star review, which helps others find their way to the Great Ideas Podcast.